Now, back home, there was heavy police presence earlier outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court when the arms deal case involving former President Jacob Zuma and French arms company Thales resumed. Neither former President Zuma nor the Thales representatives were present in court. An agreement by the state and the defense. They face money laundering, corruption and racketeering charges linked to the multi-billion rand arms deal. The state and Thales have indicated that they prefer for the trial to commence on the 17th of May, which it will. Arms deal critic, author and director of Open Secrets, Hennie Van Vuuren, joins us now. Very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Van Vuuren.
Good evening, Spiso.
So now this has been a very long process. Do you believe that now that a trial commencement date has been set, that South Africans will finally get to the bottom of what happened and who did what?
Well, Tsepiso, I think absolutely. I think you and many viewers may feel that this matter has dragged on for a good 15 years. We won't forget that that was when some of the charges had first been instituted and others have been added since. But I think that there's finally some kind of a deadline on the horizon with this new date of the 17th of May. Today was really just cleaning up the pre-trial hearings, so dealing with various court matters. But for the very first time, we have consensus between the NPA, between the lawyers for former President Zuma, and of course the lawyers for the French arms company Thales, who had been doing everything legally possible to also block the process of holding them to account for their alleged involvement in these crimes. And they have all agreed that the trial can and will begin on the 17th of May. So I think one can be more optimistic than we could have been for at least a decade, that we have a date, and of course that both Thales as a corporation and the former president have a date with justice.
Okay. Now, let's talk about exactly that. You've tweeted in the past that you've written to the State Capture Commission chair saying that it's time that corporations fully account for their role in state capture. Could you talk a little bit more about this in the context of the allegations against Thales?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think organizations like Open Secrets, where I work, and a number of other civil society organizations have for some time been calling, and certainly wrote to the Deputy Chief Justice in December of last year, and argued that if we want to have full truth-telling at the Zondo Commission, we need to ensure that corporations that are implicated in enabling state capture, so the big banks, the accounting firms, the household names that we know from, frankly, Deloitte to PwC to FNB and Nedbank, and HSBC, the big global banks, are all held to account, because without them, corrupt elites wouldn't be able to do what they do in countries like South Africa and across the globe. Doesn't matter what the state of democracy is. And we saw exactly the same thing happen in the arms deal. In a way, the arms deal was the blueprint for state capture that follows. And so I think the point being is that we again see the fingerprint of large, very powerful arms companies. The slight difference, of course, is that many of those arms companies are part state-owned, unlike many of the private corporations that were involved in state capture. But those large arms companies have made a mint out of corrupt arms deals like those in South Africa. And of course, it's the people of a country like South Africa and many other African countries and countries in the South across the globe.
I'm curious about something that, Mr. Van Vuuren, I mean, you mentioned some of the financial institutions and corporates, but how do you make them provide detailed evidence of their alleged complicity in your mind, especially given the fact that there's no incentive, to be honest, because it results in financial and reputational ruin? I mean, you've mentioned some of them, the allegations against KPMG SA, McKinsey, Credit Suisse, Bank of Baroda, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. We've provided detailed evidence, in fact, Tsepiso. So again, Open Secrets undertook a detailed investigation into the enablers of state capture. We produced a 100-page report, which was provided to the Commission, and the Commission took receipt of. And of course, there's been an enormous amount of detail that's appeared. I think our concern, and we must make the link again back to the arms deal, but I think our concern is that we often treat political elites who are implicated in state capture different from very powerful economic elites. Now, that isn't to say that we don't want private companies operating in our system of governance, but we do want them to operate in a way that's in line with the law and the same that we expect of politicians. And in fact, I think a concern is when we look at the State Capture Commission. When somebody like former President Jacob Zuma is called and everything is very much centered around him as a person, it's correct that he's held to account by the Commission, and certainly we and other civil society organizations have argued this. He must come and answer in front of the people of South Africa and, of course, in front of the Deputy Chief Justice. But equally, we need the CEOs, the board chairpersons of companies where there is ample evidence, whether it's Bain and Company linked to the destruction of SARS, or, as you say, big companies like KPMG. They can't just pay small fines and make these problems go away. Partly because, Sipiso, we see them back again. Thales, if I can make the last point, which is linked to alleged corruption in the arms deal, together with British Aerospace and other big companies, is alleged to have been involved in arms sanctions busting during apartheid. And so we see a continuity of criminal practice which wasn't dealt with in the early days of democracy.
And it's because of this that I'm curious about that as well, because as you've mentioned, that the biggest winners in the arms deal were British Aerospace, which is now BAE Systems, and Saab. So how is it that the focus is on former President Zuma and Thales at the moment? How do we prevent ourselves from having a linear point of view of what is actually involved and who is within those corrupt networks?
Yeah, so, look, I certainly don't speak on behalf of the NPA, and I think we would argue as Open Secrets, and I'm sure others do as well, is that what we need to do is start those prosecutions with Jacob Zuma, partly because it was his effort and Thales' effort to escape justice which really led to the destruction of the NPA. What happened in state capture was partly a result of this. So these prosecutions are really important because they set the tone, but this can't be the last word on it. There are German companies, there are, as you said, Saab, the Swedish company, British Aerospace, very clearly, and the people that are linked to them. Again, last year we presented new evidence, in fact, evidence that was provided to us by former Chief of the Defence Force, General Siphiwe Nyanda, which suggested that he was involved in a relationship which I can at best only describe as a gross conflict of interest between him and arms middleman BAE agent Fana Hlongwane. Now, these people, I think, all need to be held properly to account. And so this is not, the trial of Jacob Zuma and Thales should not be the final word in terms of justice for the crimes linked to the arms deal. In fact, it should be the very first. And maybe, Tapiso, that helps us recognize that there is an army of corporations and dodgy politicians and middlemen who would all seek to see this matter closed down in Pietermaritzburg and not go to trial, in the same way that they would back someone linked to state capture and not want to see them held to account by the Zondo Commission. So we need to see the network of corporations and individuals who benefit from the failure of the prosecution of a case like this.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Hennie Van Vuuren, who's an arms deal critic, author and director of Open Secrets.